Hi again. So I'll ask you first since you've been more involved with the initiative than I have. But can you tell me a little bit?
I
Huh?
feel like I feel like we've been involved at a similar level, no?
I think yours was more in depth, whereas mine was kind of more on the outside. Because the class that I took wasn't. It's more of like a sister course, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but so we for preface, we are catching up on 2 weeks. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with HSTEM and some of the work that you've done with them?
Yeah, it was actually pure serendipity, as so many things in life, I guess, or even academia, happen. So I gave a talk at Yale, and after the talk, a young man came up to me and talked to me about this course called Being Human in STEM, and he felt a lot of the things in the course resonated with things I was talking about, humanistic values in STEM instruction, STEM practice. And so I kept in contact with him, just more or less talked about what he was doing. But then at the same time, a colleague of mine connected me to somebody at Amherst, um, who was involved. I think Sarah Bonnell was her name, who was heavily involved in being human in STEM. And then Sarah connected me with Sheila Jaswal, who was the actual sort of founder, right? That then turned into an invitation to come to Amherst. So I went, gave talks, workshops, and met the students who were in the class, and met the one of the students who were part of that protest movement. Heard just a lot of beautiful stories about how it came to be, how it was sustained, and then more importantly, how it was spread to other campuses. Um, I attended like kind of like a mini human STEM conference that they had at Brown a couple of years ago, and met some students from other universities who were presenting their project. And then Sheila got some funding to have a meeting, which we couldn't have because of the pandemic, but I'm on the advisory board, and just continue to kind of think of ways to broaden what their long-term goals are. What I particularly love about the founding of this is that it came from the uprising of the students, right? So they are the ones who kind of recognize that the, the way in which this pedagogy is being enacted is divorced from our lived experience, and you need to do better. Right? And to give people at Amherst credit, they did, at least they're trying to. But this being kind of a student-led initiative that turned into many universities trying to offer this class, I think is a really really important part of the story. So yeah, that was my introduction. What about you?
And do you know off the top of your head how many universities are involved? I think they're in the double digits now, aren't they?
Yeah, like low double digits, like 11 or 12, I believe.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for me, I was at Brown, and there was a course called Race and Gender in the Scientific Community, and it was being taught out of the applied math department by one of my favorite instructors. And so I decided to try it out. It was the first year that he was teaching it on his own, because originally that curriculum, so the list of readings, the questions, the discussions, and the format of the course came out of also a student group who approached them and said, hey, listen, we want to do an independent study, a group independent study, so a GISP, around these topics, and we want to have these readings and talk about these topics because we think that they're important, and we want to be able to do some sort of research project at the end, so some sort of project generally. And so the students picked all the readings, they picked all the questions, all the themes that they were going to explore, and he was just the instructor who signed off on it, but he really enjoyed the course, and so he decided to teach it. And it was a discussion-based seminar.
Mhm.
So we'd all do the readings, we'd sit in a circle, talk about them. Each week we had one group of students present on what their readings were and format the discussion questions, design what those questions were gonna look like. And then at the end, we got to do a or some sort of project. Most of us did research projects because that was kind of like our area of comfort. And that's when I was able to do research around the attrition of underrepresented students in STEM. And so we interviewed a bunch of students who had left either from physical sciences to go into life sciences, or who had left science fields altogether, and some who had stayed and talked about, you know, what were the challenges that they faced, why did they leave, and so on and so forth. The following year, when Yale did the conference for being human in STEM, at the time, I think there were only 3 or 4 schools that were teaching this, a course similar to this, the teaching the HSTEM. And I got to present my research there, and it was just so powerful to see so many students. And at that time, I was a senior, and to see so many younger students, so many first years, you know, straight out of high school, being able to do this type of research and engage in these conversations and do really powerful projects. Some folks did more community-based projects where they actually worked with other people. Some people did like created toolboxes or toolkits, and I just fell in love with it. So fast forward to being at URI, and they're doing this call out for 1 credit courses, and I thought, why not, right? This is something that I really enjoyed. It's something that I would love to have. I think it's conversations that we should all be having, right? Anyone who is in STEM should be having these types of conversations, and these are, you know, so many times we shy away from having these conversations because we're afraid to say the wrong thing. We're afraid to say something and sound ignorant or sound racist or homophobic or whatever it may be. And we end up not having these conversations. And how are we supposed to learn? How are we supposed to be better if we don't talk about this? So shout out to you. I reached out to you, and I think we have a beautiful symbiosis now.
I'll do whatever you tell me to do, right? So.
Thank you. Listen, good, because I'm trying to make this a 4 credit course. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing you just said, I think is important, is that I believe this should be discussed in all STEM courses, right? And one of the reasons why I was attracted to the movement, I was attracted to doing this class with you, is that it's something I strive to do in my intro bio class. So, of course, we talk about biology content, but we embed in that content how this is contextualized within how society functions at the time, in the future, how you think about yourself, your role. So being human in STEM to me is not just having a class called being human in STEM, it's being human in STEM, right? So STEM being any class is a STEM class. It behooves us to always be discussing what being human in that context is. So that to me is how the movement becomes actualized at some point in the future. But baby steps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Baby steps. It's wild. I had my URI 101 courses this week. We were talking the suggestion module was learning from and listening to different perspectives or diverse perspectives. And so I actually gave them, so all of the readings for this class, I gave them the entire list, and I said, pick 1 reading from the first week, 1 reading from the second week, and then any other reading that you want to, any other reading from the list, and just, reflect on it. And we had really powerful conversations yesterday around, my students are computer science students or data science majors, and had really powerful conversations around their role as computer scientists and what role they play and what role they should be playing. So that was so fun, and I loved it so much, and I was so happy to have the opportunity to do it, but I was so heartbroken to know that this might be the only time they hear that, right? They're going to hear it 1 time in 1 class their freshman year, and they might never hear it again because those are not topics that most of our faculty are comfortable talking about, nor are they topics that a lot of faculty even feel is important or relevant, right? A lot of faculty have this mindset of, I'm here to teach them the foundations of XYZ, right? Like whatever your subject field is. And they dissociate the fact that we are humans in these fields, and all of the things that we're doing and we're learning and we're applying are going to have effects and consequences on other human beings. And so it's important to have these conversations because we don't want to unintentionally cause harm, which, as we've seen from a lot of these readings, we are doing, right? Because we're not thinking about all those other humans that are being affected by this.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the coding bias film from the film festival, but it was really really good. And I think every data science, computer science major needs to be kind of engaging themselves in conversations like that. I want to make sure we don't run out of time. We're also going to talk about um, what's women in science or the
Mhm.
second indigenous.
It was gender,
I don't remember which one.
gender and
Okay.
STEM. Really, I mean,
Um,
it was women in STEM, right? Because we don't have that much material. And we have another week on LGBTQIA community in STEM, and that's when we'll look at books.
so yeah, thoughts on reflections the students share?
Can you say that again? Thoughts on
Any
that?
thoughts or reflections the students share?
Uh, yeah, I mean, so I think I yeah, so many things on regarding women in STEM. Not even so much women in STEM, but so if folks remember, the sections were divided with women in STEM, right? So what it's like to identify as a woman and do STEM, but then there was also STEM for women, right? And these
Mm-hmm.
how the fact that STEM looks the way that it does has all these negative effects on women who are affected by this. And thinking about the readings, how you know this is truly a life or death scenario, right? Or life or death issue. We thinking about seatbelts, right? So one of the things that doesn't come up, so it talks about, one of the readings talks about car accidents and airbags and how the dummies are used with men's measurements. But one of the things that isn't talked about that I found out later on was seatbelts. So if someone is pregnant and they get into a car accident, the way that the seatbelt is designed, because it's designed with the male body in mind and not anyone pregnant, um, when someone is in a car accident, because the seatbelt locks, a lot of women end up losing, having miscarriages, or the fetus gets injured or dies because the way that the seatbelt cuts into the stomach is not it's not optimal, right? And there's a company that's selling these weird attachments that attach to the seat, and they pull the seatbelt down, and so the seatbelt is still, like, it'll still protect you from a car crash, from hitting the steering wheel or from flying out the window, but it won't harm the fetus. And that was, as someone who has never been pregnant, that was something that even as a woman, I was like, I never even thought of that. And thinking about,
And this is
there's so many things we don't know. Sorry, what was that?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is partly why representation matters, right? And obviously we want this inclusion conversation to end up in equity and not just representation. But at the very least, representation matters. It reminds me of a story I read in the book The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis. Really, really good book. One chapter talks about one of the early female astronauts, and she was talking about the people at NASA trying to figure out how to handle if women get their period in space and what to pack. And it was, I mean, it was funny to the point of tears, right? So like, I think the first time they like gave them like like a year's worth of stuff. And the woman looked at me like, what do you think happens at that time? And you may or may not notice, it was actually somebody designed this, really absorbent material for their use that ended up being the technology that we use now for today's diapers. So it came out of that process, right? But to hear, Michael Lewis, well, not Michael Lewis, but the astronaut actually talk about this back and forth they had with NASA administration, who were pretty much 100% guys, on like what happens at this time of the month. It's like, what were you men? But not on their radar, don't think about it, never had to think about it, and such was the case. So anyway, I'll just close real quick with this story because I had to go in a meeting in like a minute. But I teach intro-bio, and this week we talking about DNA structures, and as some people in the audience may or may not know, even though Watson and Crick got the Nobel Prize for it, they couldn't have discovered that without the data from Rosalind Franklin, and her data was given to Watson and Crick without her knowledge. In fact, the Nobel Prize was awarded, and I think she died before she even knew it was awarded. Um, and it was, like Watson and Crick, or at least Maurice Wilkins, the technician, who, by the way, assumed that Rosalind Franklin was like, some subservient person. Um, never kind of thought to them that it was a problem to do that, right? And so we're having some interesting conversations this week in IntroBio around that mentality, and how we've come from that. So anyway, I mean, it's good to kind of, this is what part of what being human in STEM is. As we talk about the content, we talk about people's role and place in that, and things like that. So anyway, I mean, I think that our students got that from the reflections I saw. Um, and, I guess we'll see next week when we talk more about indigenous and other questions with gender.
Yes, I am very excited to keep reading the reflections. And honestly, I am a little behind, so I do have to catch up. But I'm super excited to read them. I know they always bring me so much joy to see that folks are learning so much and enjoying these readings. So shout out to you all. We will see you next week, and we will interact virtually in the meantime till then.
All right.